It was supposed to be a family dinner. One of those nights that pretends to mean more than it does. The kind you plan not because you want to, but because it's the right thing. A kind of tired ritual. Chicken in the oven. Cheap wine on the table. Ethan home from college, his duffel bag kicked halfway under the stairs. A sour look already on his face before he said a single word. The house was rented. We didn't own it. Just outside Madison, one of those narrow suburban homes that look wider from the street, like they're trying to trick you into thinking there's more inside. Just enough space to pretend we were whole. I had set the table myself. No one asked me to. They never did. But I laid out the plates anyway. Poured water into the glasses. Folded the napkins, cloth, not paper, because I thought it might make things feel like effort mattered. Like if I just kept showing up, the wall between us would soften. Mary was in the kitchen, scraping something into a bowl. She hadn't said much since Ethan arrived. He'd come through the door like a storm cloud, hugged her without looking her in the eyes, then brushed past me with a nod so short it felt like a warning. We were eating by 7. Roast chicken, potatoes, the kind of meal that pretends to heal something. Mary lit a candle, then laughed like it was a joke. "I don't know why I bother," she said. "He never notices." She was talking about me, but she didn't say my name. She hadn't in weeks. I sat down in my usual seat, third from the left, closest to the kitchen, the seat that let me get up fast when something needed clearing or fixing or refilling. The one I always took so no one else had to move. I had been taking that chair for over 10 years. That's when Ethan grabbed the back of it and yanked it toward him. Move. The word wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It hit like a slap. Fast, unexpected, final. I looked up. Sorry. He didn't blink. Just stared at me like I had taken something from him. Something sacred. "That seat's for my real father." His voice didn't crack. He didn't flinch. He said it like it was law. Like it had always been true and I was the one who'd forgotten. And then lower, like it hurt him more than it hurt me to say it, he added, "You were a mistake." There was no gasp. No one stood up in outrage. The candle flickered once. Car passed outside. Mary didn't say a word. Not even a wince. I looked at her. Long hard. Begging in silence for something. Anything. A word. Correction. A hand on the table to show me I wasn't alone. She looked down at her plate. And that was it. I sat there for a moment, staring at the food I had helped pay for, the wine I had bought, the boy I had driven to school, picked up from football practice, taught how to hold a hammer. I looked at my wife, the woman who once told me she loved how I showed up even when it was hard, and watched her chew her dinner like I wasn't even in the room. Something inside me stopped breathing. I didn't yell. God knows I could have. I had every right to throw the chair across the room, to tell Ethan exactly what I'd given up for him, to ask Mary why the hell she thought silence was protection. But I didn't. I stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. I folded my napkin, placed it on the plate, slipped my coat from the hook by the stairs. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. Not even a glance. It was cold outside. Mid-November chill. The kind that creeps through the seams of your coat and settles in your bones. I didn't bring gloves. My hands felt numb before I hit the end of the driveway. But I kept walking. Not to leave. Not in the way they hoped I might, like some dramatic exit they could dismiss the next morning. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. I just stepped into the night like I was fading out of a photograph. Because that's what it felt like. Not rejection, erasure. Like I'd been edited out of the story. Like the part of the picture with my face had been cropped and no one noticed the empty space. I walked past the fence I repaired last summer when the storm knocked it over. Past the flower bed I planted for Mary on her birthday, the one Ethan never watered. Past the mailbox with the rusted hinge I'd been meaning to fix. Everything I touched, everything I gave, stayed behind me. And me? I was done pretending. Done believing that effort mattered if it wasn't seen. Done standing in the gap between a man who left and a boy who hated the reminder. Done being tolerated instead of accepted. Ethan had drawn his line. Mary had chosen her silence. And me? I made a decision. Not out of anger. not revenge. I felt those things before, hot, short-lived, useless. This wasn't that. This was colder, cleaner, like standing under ice water and realizing you can feel everything and nothing at the same time. I would not fight for a seat I was never meant to have. I would not beg for a title I had more than earned. And I would not stay where I was treated like furniture. They called me a mistake. Fine. Then let's see what happens when mistakes are corrected. Let's see what their world looks like when the man they erased finally agrees with them and removes himself completely. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the garage instead, in the dark, the old space heater buzzing at my feet, throwing off just enough warmth to keep my hands from freezing. There was no music, no phone calls, just me and the sound of the house creaking above me, the sound of a life continuing without me. I stared at the shelves I'd built with my own hands, tools organized in a way no one else understood. A stack of receipts in a folder marked Ethan, taped shut, as if I'd always known I might need to open it one day and be reminded of what I'd paid for. And I had paid. Not just in money, though there was plenty of that. No, I paid in time, in silence, in standing second in a race where the other runner never showed up. That night, I decided I was done funding their comfort. By morning, I had already logged into the bank. I moved fast, not out of spite but precision, closed the joint accounts, revoked every secondary user. Anything with Mary's name attached gone. She would find out eventually, but not from me. From the cold silence of rejection returned. Then came the credit cards. 2 of them were tied to Ethan, one for school expenses, the other for emergencies. I didn't freeze them. That would make noise. I canceled them outright, deleted the accounts, scrubbed my name from their access like mold off a basement wall. Subscriptions? Gone. Insurance premiums I had auto-paid for the last decade? Transferred or terminated. Their cell phones had been under my name. I'd added them once because the family plan was cheaper. Now I killed the plan entirely. Let them figure out who still answers when the signal drops. The house wasn't in my name. I had made sure of that, a protection not for me but for Mary back when I believed sacrifice meant safety. But everything inside it? Every appliance, every piece of furniture, every smart device or cable subscription, paid for by me. So I didn't take anything. I didn't need to. I simply made sure I no longer sustained it. There's power in stepping back, quiet power. The kind no one sees coming because they're too used to you holding everything up. I erased myself like a ghost who'd gotten tired of haunting a home that never knew his name. I didn't leave a note. No goodbyes. Just packed a single duffel bag, the same kind Ethan had tossed by the stairs when he arrived, like his presence was a favor to the house. I walked out before sunrise. No one noticed. Not then. Mary would wake up to a silent kitchen, the bank app spinning error messages, her phone refusing to connect. Maybe she'd think it was a glitch. Maybe she'd call the provider. Maybe she'd sit on hold while Ethan rolled his eyes and asked what the big deal was. Let them guess. Let them chase ghosts. But I left something behind. Something they hadn't bothered to check. My name. In one place. One quiet place. See, there had been a form 2 years ago. University paperwork. Emergency contact. Financial guarantor. I'd signed it not electronically. In ink. The kind of signature that still holds weight when digital footprints disappear. Mary had skimmed it. Ethan had tossed it into a drawer. But universities don't forget. Especially when they're owed money. Especially when the signature is still binding. That was the crack. That's where the chain started to snap. Because they assumed they'd buried me completely. That cutting me off at dinner, silencing me at the table, was the end. But they forgot that systems remember. They forgot that erasing a man from your life doesn't erase him from the systems that feed your life. And when the payments stopped, and the tuition office called, they didn't call Mary. They called me. I let it ring. Then I blocked the number. Because I wasn't playing cleanup anymore. Not for a boy who called me a mistake. Not for a woman who couldn't speak up when it mattered. By noon that day, the ripple had begun. It started with emails, the polite kind. Notifications. Action required. Unable to process payment. Please update your information. I watched them roll in from my old university login, the account I still had access to, because I had set it up myself. For Ethan, because he couldn't be bothered to read the paperwork. Then came the real ones. From the housing office. From the campus bursar. From the registrar flagging his enrollment status. A week, that's all it took. 1 week from dinner table to detonation. I heard it from across town. I had rented a studio. Nothing fancy. Month to month. Just me, a mattress on the floor, a desk, a laptop, and silence. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call anyone. I didn't explain. Because explanations are for people who believe the listener cares. I was done assuming anyone did. That's when the first voicemail landed. Not from Mary. From the university. Polite. Urgent. We need to speak with the financial guarantor listed on this student's account. I deleted it. The next one came from Ethan. His voice, thinner than usual. A little cracked around the edges. Hey, I don't know what's going on, but the school's saying tuition didn't clear. Can you check? I think something's wrong with the card. The card. Like it had canceled itself. Like the money had just wandered off in the night. Bored. No apology. No acknowledgement. No. I'm sorry for what I said. Just expectation. I didn't reply, because that's what they taught me. Silence is permission. So I gave them silence. Mary emailed me 3 days later. Short. Clinical. Michael, I don't know what's happening, but I think the accounts were changed. The bank says I don't have access. Was this a mistake? I stared at the screen for a long time. A mistake. That word again. I didn't respond. Let her sit with the echo. Let her feel what I had felt every time I tried to belong to a place that had already made room for someone else. She knew. Deep down, she knew. But people like her, people who sit still while others bleed, they don't confess. They just wait for the next man to clean the mess. Not this time. This time, the mess was hers to keep. A week turned into 2. I didn't get another message for a while. Then, early one morning, before sunrise, my phone buzzed. A single text. Police came to the house. That was all it said. No, can you call me? No, please. Just a fact. Like I was supposed to explain it. But I knew what it was. Because when you sign your name on official documents, you're more than a bank account. You're a liability, connection, a chain. And when that chain breaks, people ask questions. They want to know why the guarantor vanished, why payments stopped, why the signature at the bottom of the page now leads to silence. And when the school couldn't get a hold of me, they reached out the only way institutions know how, through escalation. I had set the dominoes years ago. Now they were falling, not with violence, but precision, one by one. They thought they had covered every trace. But they forgot the most important rule. You don't get to erase a man and still spend his money. The old landline rang at 6:43 a.m. That alone was strange. No one used it. We kept it because it was bundled with the internet, a relic of habit more than function. For years it sat mute, buried under takeout menus and unopened mail. But that morning it rang, and Mary picked up. I wasn't there, but I can picture it clearly. She probably frowned, thinking it was a telemarketer. Pressed the handset to her ear with half a sigh, her other hand reaching for coffee. She was still in her robe, I imagine. The same blue one I'd bought her 3 birthdays ago. The one Ethan had rolled his eyes at and called old-fashioned. She answered with a tired, "Hello." The voice on the other end didn't match her expectation. "This is the police. Please open the door." They were already outside. That's when the panic began. She didn't call me. She wouldn't dare. Instead, she probably ran to Ethan's room, shook him awake, breath stammering with the weight of uncertainty. The kind that creeps in when you realize the person who always solved the problems isn't in the house anymore. They didn't understand what was happening yet. Not fully. But I did. Because I'd read the fine print. They had used my name in ways they barely understood. Mary had nodded along when I signed things. Ethan had shrugged through meetings, waved off deadlines, never reading past the bold headings. But those forms were contracts. The kind that stack up in dark folders and come back years later with teeth. And now they wanted someone accountable. Someone who had guaranteed Ethan's education. Someone who had co-signed. Someone who had promised repayment if the student defaulted, if the loans were mishandled, if the tuition didn't land on time. That someone was me. And I wasn't there anymore. Not as a father. Not as a husband. Not as the man who fixed everything. The officers weren't there to arrest anyone. Not yet. They were there to clarify, to make contact, to find out why the chain of responsibility had been broken so abruptly. They asked questions. Who is the financial guarantor? Why is the listed number disconnected? Why did all payments cease without notice? Mary, I imagine, stumbled through half answers. Told them it was an internal matter. Said we were working things out. Her voice probably trembled around the edges of her lies. Ethan wouldn't have spoken. Not at first. He'd sit on the stairs, jaw tight, anger simmering just beneath the confusion. He thought this was some glitch, some fluke in the system that would resolve itself once someone pushed the right button. But systems don't work like that. They escalate, especially when money is involved. I don't know exactly what they told her. I wasn't there to hear the warnings, the paperwork, the deadlines. But I know how these things unfold. I've walked into offices and negotiated repayment plans. I've made late-night calls to keep accounts from going into collections. I've dealt with the language of finance enough to know what comes next. Notices, holds, legal letters, and consequences. But this time they weren't mine to catch. That afternoon she called me. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. The next day another call. This time from a number I didn't recognize. I answered instinct, maybe, or curiosity. Is this Michael Hargrove? Yes. This is Officer Langley with the Madison Police Department. We're trying to reach you regarding a financial matter connected to an educational institution. I didn't flinch. My voice was calm. I'm aware. There was a pause. The officer, professional but cautious, continued. You've been listed as the primary guarantor for a student currently facing institutional penalties for non-payment. The university has attempted contact and has now escalated the issue. We're simply trying to understand if there's an intent to resolve the outstanding balance before further action is taken. I almost laughed. Not cruelly, just a bitter exhale through the nose. Because they were still treating me like the man I used to be. The man who answered calls, showed up, wrote checks to stop the bleeding. I said, there's no intent to resolve anything. Another pause. Then the officer asked, are you stating that you are formally withdrawing your guarantor status? No. I'm stating I no longer recognize a relationship with the student or the institution. He cleared his throat. Legally, that may not. I understand the law. I cut in. I also understand contracts. The payments have stopped. They won't resume. He didn't argue. He simply said, very well. I'll document your statement. We ended the call. That was the moment it became real, not for me, but for them. Because Mary and Ethan had always lived under the illusion of stability. They believed, deep down, that I would always be there. That no matter what venom came from Ethan's mouth, no matter how complicit Mary's silence became, I would still be standing behind them with my wallet open. But that man was dead. And what replaced him didn't answer calls out of obligation. Only purpose. They tried email next. Mary wrote first. I understand you're upset. But this is serious. Ethan's education is at risk. Can we please talk? No apology. No remorse. Just urgency dressed in civility. I didn't respond. Then Ethan. His message came 2 hours later. Subject. Really? The body was 2 lines. You're letting them come after us? Over what? Your pride. I said one thing one night. This is beyond messed up. I deleted it. He didn't understand yet. He still thought this was emotional. That I was reacting out of hurt. That if he just said the right mix of anger and guilt, I'd fall back into line. But this wasn't hurt. This was consequence. Mary followed up with a longer message, a paragraph this time. She explained that the tuition office had placed a hold on Ethan's enrollment. that his courses for next semester were now inaccessible, that his university email was frozen, that the school wouldn't release his transcripts. She said words like future and stability and what's best for the family. I stared at the screen, unmoved, because she hadn't said the one word that mattered. Sorry. Not once. There was no recognition of what had been done to me, no admission of the knife that had been driven into my back, at my own dinner table, with her looking the other way. She wanted restoration without repentance, support without respect. She still believed that if she framed the story as one of shared crisis, I'd jump back in. But I had already drowned in that house once. I wasn't going back under. They thought they were out of options, but they had one left, and I knew exactly who they would turn to next. The man whose seat Ethan had defended. The man who gave gifts but never paid bills. The man they called real only when it hurt me most. Todd, the biological father. The ghost they always kept warm space for, even as I swept his footprints from their floor. He arrived in the middle of the week. Todd. No warning. No heads up. Just his car. Dented, underwashed, out-of-state plates. Pulling into the driveway like he still knew the shape of their lives. Like a decade of absence could be erased with a full tank of gas and a leather jacket that had aged worse than he had. I wasn't there, of course. But I heard about it. From a neighbor. She texted me. The old one across the street who used to wave every morning when I left for work. That guy, the one who used to come around when Ethan was younger, is back. Everything okay? I didn't reply. Because yes, everything was exactly as it should be. Mary had finally gone to him. Out of desperation, not affection. She tried everything else. She had knocked on every door, pulled every lever. But the last thread had snapped. And when the system stopped responding to her emails, when Ethan's access to classes, housing, transportation, and even health insurance started to evaporate, there was only one name left that still technically meant father. The biological one. The man who came around on birthdays with $100 bills and left before the candles cooled. The man whose absence I had spent 16 years covering for. And now he was back. Because I had stopped pretending. I imagined the scene. Mary opening the door, her voice just a little too tight. Her eyes darting toward the living room where Ethan pretended not to listen. The stammer in her breath when she asked, "Can we talk?" And Todd stepping in like nothing had changed. Like he had any right to the air in that house. Like he wasn't walking across a floor that I had scrubbed, past walls I had painted, toward problems he'd left for someone else to clean. Ethan didn't resist. That much I knew. He'd wanted this for years, that mythical reunion. The bloodline made flesh. The father who never yelled, never disciplined, never withheld. Because he was never around long enough to be real. And now here he was. The fantasy made tangible. I wonder if they offered him dinner. Sat him in the chair that started all of this. I wonder if Ethan told him how proud he was. How grateful. How right it felt to have his real dad there. What I don't wonder, what I know, is that they handed him the bills. Literally. A folder of printouts. Loan statements. University warnings. Phone bills. Insurance terminations. A spreadsheet probably with the tuition balance in bold at the top. I know how Mary works. Organized panic. Crisis wrapped in efficiency. She would have had it all ready, hoping it would soften the ask. Make it feel like less of a rescue and more of a shared responsibility. But Todd had never been good with responsibility. Or pressure. Or bills. That's when the silence started. Not the quiet kind. The thick, humiliating kind. I imagine Todd's fingers tightening around the edges of the papers. His jaw working. The way he would lean back slightly, posture stiffening, not with pride, but with calculation. That's when he would have said it. Something like, "I wasn't prepared for this." Or maybe, "This isn't something I can take on right now." Maybe even, "You should have come to me sooner." And Ethan, the boy who'd kicked me out of my own seat, would have watched his savior start to sink. Watched the myth shrink in real time. Watched the fantasy father turn back into the man who left. It didn't matter how the words came out. What mattered is what they meant. No help. No money. No backup plan. Just another man with limits. And this time, no one there to clean up the fallout. Mary texted me that night. I hadn't heard from her in a week. She wrote, "He won't help. Says he can't afford it. Doesn't even know how to access the loan portal. Ethan's devastated. I don't know what to do. Can we please talk?" No apology. No correction. No reaching for the truth. Still hoping I'd play my part. Still thinking I might be the net beneath their fall. I didn't respond, because I was already past the edge. The point of no return isn't a moment. It's not dramatic or loud. It doesn't announce itself with slamming doors or final words. It's quieter than that. It's the moment you realize you don't want them to ask anymore, because you already know the answer is no. It's not about pride. It's not about revenge. It's about peace. And peace is never possible when you're being used. They thought my absence was a punishment. It wasn't. It was a cure. The next day, Ethan called me. Not to scream. Not to insult. But to plead. He left a voicemail, his voice different now. Smaller. Frayed around the edges. "Michael, I know I said some things. I didn't mean it like that. I was just angry. I thought, I don't know. Can we just talk? Please?" No mention of his words. No real ownership. Just desperation, softened by guilt. It was too late. I let it sit in my inbox, unopened. A digital tombstone for a relationship already buried. Then came the knock. Not on my door. On Mary's. This time it was the university in person. A representative. A notice. Ethan's enrollment had been suspended. Not delayed. Not frozen. Suspended. He'd missed too many deadlines. Owed too much. No paperwork. No payments. No parent. And now he was nothing more than an unpaid name in their system. When the door closed behind them, the silence must have been unbearable. I imagine Mary sitting at the kitchen table, the one I built. The one Ethan used to study on. The one I sanded down after he gouged it with a compass because he didn't want to do his math homework. She'd sit there with the paper in front of her, eyes red, mouth dry. And Ethan? He'd be upstairs, staring at a frozen class portal, reading emails that reminded him he no longer had access, packing a bag he didn't know where to take, calling a father who wouldn't answer, and thinking about the one who used to. That night, I sat in my studio, lights off, phone in my lap. I didn't cry. I didn't feel joy, just stillness. Like standing at the edge of a field after the fire's gone out. Ash everywhere. Quiet. And the knowledge that I had not started the fire. I had simply stopped holding the hose. They wanted my place at the table. What they got was empty space. And a signature that still spoke louder than all their silence. I used to think that being a stepfather was a role I could grow into. That time and effort and sacrifice could carve a space in someone else's house. But it doesn't work like that. A role without respect is servitude. A seat without invitation is a target. And a family that doesn't speak for you speaks against you. I didn't go back. I didn't explain. Because sometimes the loudest message is absence. And sometimes the only way to be heard is to disappear completely. They're learning that now. One consequence at a time.